So with all of this, we're, I guess, thinking very creatively and innovating to deal with problems that come from current systems. Is there an end game that everyone's working to that is the sort of the new food systems, which maybe we're only sort of 1% into that journey so far, but we all know that that's where we want it to end up? And for example, will we all be eating insects?
Well, I don't know about that. We'll come back to the insects. For us at UK Harvest, our end game is not having to exist anymore. We redistribute food, and that's the core part of our charity. However, the big part for us is education around behavioural change as well, so that we get ourselves out of the problem and instigate that behavioural change.
What's your end game? Is it we're eating all our packaging?
A plastic bottle takes 700 years to decompose, but on average we use it for 20 minutes. And I suppose what we're looking at is that aspect, that if you were using a chair that's been made out of plastic, you might have it for 30 years. So suddenly 700 years doesn't seem so bad, but when you're using something for 20, 30 minutes and then it's going to take 700 years to get rid of, it doesn't seem as sort of worth it.
Yeah, very shocking. Solveiga?
A really interesting piece of research actually came out from the Ohio State University, which they basically put jugs of milk in front of participants without date labels and some with like an expiry date, and people found older milk acceptable when it didn't have a date on it than like if there's as soon as we just put this black and white date on food, suddenly all of our logic jumps out the window and we just see this as like the end authority and final say on food freshness just because it's there and it's a number and it's hard data. And what we're trying to do is try to educate people to understand when it is okay to use food until, and actually you can push food really much further than you think. And we're trying to show people that
we're moving further and further away from knowing where our food comes. Food's now global, so we're all eating things that came from another part of the world, which 50 or 60 years ago we never would have had. Someone recently, Joe Wicks or someone, is in Costa Rica and took a picture of a pineapple on a tree, and people are like, pineapples grow on trees in the ground, like how they, just didn't understand where they came from. And I think, to me, the industrialization and the globalization of food are what's created this divide between knowing that. Yeah. So it's a re-education rather than an education.
Excellent point. Sorry.
On the education, I suppose we found in our aspect, because it's a new product and people are struggling maybe to understand with a new thing how you use it or why you need to use it. And it's not so much that they haven't been educated or their education is wrong, it's just when something's new, they need more knowledge to go with it. And we found, like, when we were giving out them at the marathon, people were struggling sometimes on how they eat them, why they need to eat them, or can they swallow it? If they don't swallow it, is it going to be bad to the environment? Or why do you want to eat it? We wouldn't eat it normally. And I suppose it's just part of thing when you get new products and new objects and new foods, if it's not something you consume daily, you sort of are a bit more cautious about it maybe, and you just need a little bit more of a push to want to do it.
So are you all happy that it's, with all of this innovation, creation of new companies that are focused on all of the sort of different issues that exist within our food systems today, are you happy that it's all shifting fast enough?
I think it is, actually. I think sometimes there's many examples where you can see, I don't know if you guys saw the petition, like 50,000 people signed a petition to get McDonald's to bring back plastic straws. So I think it's easy to kind of focus on that and think like, oh God, like what's the point? But for example, the CEO of Unilever last year said that their brands with a sustainable and ethical mission are growing twice as fast as their other regular brands. And that just shows that even though your study found that price is still kind of key, but our studies have found that when all things are the same and there's an option with like a more sustainable, ethical mission, people are going to make that choice.
Plastic's taken 70 years to optimise, and we're still optimising plastic now to make it better, to innovate it, to make it even more usable, to make it recyclable. So if you sort of look at some of these more natural and biodegradable things that might have been around for ages, but we haven't started using them until within the last 10, 15 years, it will take a lot of time and a lot of funding to sort of get them to that point of innovation.
It's going fast, it could go faster, but I think we need the bottom-up consumer-driven approach, but I also think we need the government policy. I think we need the help to sort of mandate some of this as well and trying to reduce some of these emissions if possible.
Interestingly, overwhelmingly, there's the popular opinion in the food industry that the wastebasket is their best friend, which maybe logically, you might think that too, like the more we waste, the more we go back and purchase things. But actually our studies have found that the opposite is true. Unfortunately, we are having to do the education of actually educating the food industry about this, that this just isn't true, that the waste is actually bad for business.
So do the three of you all feel that Food Inc. has woken up? And if you had a message for big brands, big food businesses, what would that message be now?
Adapt or die.
Claire? Dom?
That we have a huge problem with food waste. Food waste globally is the third biggest carbon emitter after China and the US. If food waste were a country, it's the third biggest global emitter. And then we have abject poverty and people suffering food waste and having to choose whether to pay for energy to keep them warm in the winter or eat. So there's this huge disparity, and I think there's a lot of charities and a lot of work happening to try and bridge that. So supporting that would be our message.
I think with all due respect, charities are there obviously to bridge a gap, but it's a gap that shouldn't be there in the first place. Because maybe I'm cynical, but I think it's maybe a little too late to change the large businesses of today to completely go in the other direction, because they've just been so baked in, like waste, the linear system is so baked in. But what we can do is build the future big businesses of tomorrow by giving them the right frameworks today. So we run a series of events. We have a couple of podcasts kind of educating people how to build that into their business model. So I think business models need to change.
Anyone in the audience want to chip in or ask a question? Glenn?
If you had one tip that we could take away, maybe one from each of you, what you could do as a family of four, just one behavior change that would help, that we could take home today, what would that be?
Actually, if you do have food waste, either recycling it or putting it into composting, that means that you're taking that away from actually it ending up in landfill. It will end up as fertilizer and you can put it in your garden.
Mine's super simple. Like honestly, I love having just a box in my fridge that just says "Eat me soon," and everything that is going to be going soon, I just put it in there, and then everyone, because they're so busy, otherwise people miss stuff. Like your whole family can see what needs to be consumed first until our labels are available.
If there's a supermarket near you, like one's called Hisby, they do everything's unpackaged, so you can go with your own jars or Tupperwares and just fill up with cereal or rice, so you don't need to use all the extra packaging.
Just not expect our policymakers to get to grips with the size of this issue to the extent, the same extent as you guys are doing and that we can do as consumers. So it feels to me like if you're saying farmers can just plant non-correlating crops, you need to lay down the law for people, don't you?
There's a huge conversation to be around that. Should government and policymakers be involved in this conversation? 100%, because consumer and bottom up is brilliant, but if areas like this can be mandated as best practice and then put into place, of course that's going to speed things up.
We've had a couple of run-ins with policymakers with what we've been doing. We're kind of telling people exactly when to eat their food. And the truth of it is there's no legislation in place to stop us from doing something malicious with our technology, like telling people to eat their food way too late, and there's nothing stopping us to do that. So it's up to us and our own ethics to make sure that we do it properly. And I think what we've realized is that we just need to start, and then legislation is just going to have to keep up, but because they're certainly not being very proactive at the moment.
Thank you so much.